Thanks for having this combined class. We've got Sagar and Mahesh and Milbai coming from the Jain Vegan Group today. So they're going to talk to us about eggs. So hopefully we'll have an interesting discussion and some sort of debates going. So I'm going to hand them over to you guys.
Sure. So Jai Janendra, everyone. My name's Sagar. I used to be an SCVP student. I joined the first ever SCVP classes in London, I think about 16 years ago, and stayed on until I was 16. So it's really, really nice to be back and to do a kind of class or workshop here. As you can see, the subject of today's workshop's on eggs and what is wrong with eggs. And the aim, what I'd like to impart to all of you guys is to help improve your understanding of the egg production process, help you answer questions about why Jains don't eat eggs. I'm not sure if any of you have encountered these sorts of questions yourselves, or whether you even wonder it yourself. Perhaps you've been told something, perhaps you find it convincing, perhaps you don't. If you're undecided yourself, help you establish a position. I certainly, when I was a teenager, went back and forth on eating eggs and also wondering whether or not it was okay to eat them. And then at the end of the class, hopefully there'll be enough time to do some little demos on alternatives for eggs in cooking. It's going to be light on Jain Dharma, so most of it just relates to Aspeya and Ahimsa, non-stealing and non-violence, in kind of going through thinking about eggs and whether there are any problems with them. So just a bit more of an introduction to me. I said I joined SCVP in 1997 or 1998 when it first launched in the UK. My family, even though we're from a Jain family, actually we grew up eating it. Like my parents both ate eggs. So up until I was 5, scrambled eggs was actually my favourite food. Then I read a book by Vinod Kabashi, like an introductory Jain book. Then I gave up eggs. But then as a teenager I started getting tempted by cakes and brownies and croissants and other pastries, and got influenced by my friends and started eating them again. And then when I turned 20, just before I turned 21, I was at a Jain convention in the US and I decided to give up dairy products based on understanding the cruelty behind milk production. It was only after that I decided to give up eggs. And now I kind of feel quite passionately about living a lifestyle without using any animal products at all. I'm a trustee of the Vegan Society and also do lots of outreach work in the Jain community through the Jain Vegans Working Group with Mahesh and Minal. So I wanted to kick off with a question to all of you. Are eggs suitable for vegetarians? What do you think?
Go on, yes. Yeah.
Yes? Anyone else? Do you want to expand on it? Or?
Because eggs are good for you.
Anyone else? Anyone? How about hands up if you think they are suitable for vegetarians? One. Hands up if you don't think they're suitable for vegetarians.
So Ariel's not sure. Kind of.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, because being vegetarian is about non-violence, and I'm pretty sure getting eggs is violent. But then it's specific on not eating meat, and let's eat eggs as meat.
Sure.
Sagar, when we read food labels, it says suitable for vegetarians, and that can include eggs.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. So it sounds well. So you raised a really important point, and I think what seems to be a bit of uncertainty and confusion. Some people feel it is, some people feel like it might not be. I think this highlights some of the confusion we have living in the UK about the status of eggs. There's actually this misunderstanding, getting labelled vegetarian is probably one of the things that led me to start eating eggs again as a teenager. And it's actually a trick question. I don't think there is a correct answer. It depends on the country and it depends on the authority. So in India, there's a green dot on products, and there eggs are certainly not considered vegetarian. So you wouldn't get a green dot, a green vegetarian indicator if a product contains eggs. Whereas in the UK, where the authority on what is vegetarian and not is the Vegetarian Society, and they permit eggs and dairy products. But actually, since the Vegetarian Society formed in the 1800s, there have been debates going on among its members about the status of eggs and dairy products. With some, I think it's even mentioned in Mahatma Gandhi's autobiography when he was attending meetings with vegetarian societies when he was in London, about how there are groups that wanted to abstain from eggs and abstain from all animal products, and people that were happy to eat them. And that divide has become stronger, and in 1944 the Vegan Society got formed, which essentially was a splinter group from the Vegetarian Society. So this debate's been going on for a long time, and in reality there are lots of different definitions of vegetarian. I'm sure everyone here will agree that people that occasionally eat fish or people that occasionally eat meat, we wouldn't class them as vegetarians, but actually many people that are just avoiding red meat might call themselves vegetarian because of the culture that they come from, in the country that they come from. There's lacto-ovo-vegetarian, which essentially means you eat eggs and dairy. There's a lacto-vegetarian, which is you don't have eggs, but you have dairy. And then there's an ovo-vegetarian, which is also recently called vegan. And there's some vegan restaurants. There is a vegan restaurant in London where they have eggs, but they don't have dairy products, and they're vegans. Now, I think all of these can call themselves vegetarian. I think it's acceptable, like abstention from flesh, I think is a sufficient condition, but it is really, I think it is really confusing, and hopefully the session today will help bring a bit more clarity about if you think you don't want to eat eggs, about the reasons why. So in terms of the content, I think the first question we're going to explore is whether taking an egg is stealing. We'll then go into thinking a bit more about the violence that takes place in egg production, whether the level of violence or the himsa matters, whether or not the eggs are fertilised, some detail into the welfare of chickens in egg-producing farms, and then more about the inherent violence that exists in all production systems, irrespective of whether they're high welfare or not. And at the end, I'll show you some tricks for egg substitutes. So, does taking eggs constitute stealing? Does anyone have any thoughts?
Yes, because if they're unfertilized, it means it's the chicken's egg, so it's meant to become potential life. So then, if you take it away, you're taking away either potential life of the chick and the egg of the chicken.
So, did you say if it is fertilized, you're taking away?
Yeah, but even if it isn't, I think it can become it. So like, it's potential life. So then it is whether it's fertilized or not. But if it is fertilized, it's in a sense worse.
Very good. Thank you. Does anyone else have any thoughts?
No, because if you own the chicken, you own its eggs as well.
So, okay, so I mean, this is I think that there's a more sophisticated position. So, do you think about whether or not you think it's okay to own another life form, but you would say it's not stealing because the chicken is the ownership of a person, and their eggs are also.
I think it's wrong. I don't think it constitutes as stealing, because you own them. You were the one who, like, if it wasn't for you, they wouldn't exist. The chickens.
Well, they might exist. They might
They
exist,
wouldn't
right?
exist with you though. They wouldn't exist in the scenario that they're giving you eggs.
Yes.
So, like, I don't think it's right. Hmm? Well, you
So-
they don't have eggs unless you wanted them.
Your position is actually consistent with law
Yeah.
in the UK, right? So in law in the UK, animals aren't they are property of people, okay? And you own the animal and you own the rights to the things that they produce.
No, I'm just saying from a legal.
Yeah, no. So
I think it's wrong.
fine, okay.
It's not right.
So put in the context of the Jain principle of Asteya, would you think it's
Yes.
stealing?
Like, I think morally, yes, you're stealing from them. But
Right.
in reality, you're not. If that makes sense.
Anyone else have any thoughts? Okay, so I'm gonna share like my personal experience about again being a teacher. So I guess when I was a younger teacher, it just felt like chickens produce eggs, and they don't seem to get distressed when people take the eggs, and so it doesn't feel that problematic. I mean that was how I guess I justified eating bits of eggs and brownies and cakes when I was when I first started doing it. And then I went when I was 18. I went traveling in South America. I was living with a family in Ecuador. They actually fed me meat a couple of times and lied about it. Moved out with them, but we struggled a bit getting vegetarian food. But eggs were one of these things that were really filling. So, me and my two other friends are both in the Jain community. We went kind of from just eating eggs and cakes and things to actually eating them in omelettes and things like that on our journey in South America. And about 2 months in, we got offered. I can't remember where we went, but we got offered ostrich eggs. And all of a sudden, even though we kind of got ourselves comfortable to eating eggs from a chicken, the thought of being offered an ostrich egg really prompted this strange reaction within ourselves, like, hang on a minute, is it okay to eat ostrich eggs? Are ostrich eggs vegetarian? And then you can apply that logic and think about frog eggs, duck eggs, fish eggs, turtle eggs. And in almost all of those circumstances, if it's something you think of as a wild animal, taking away eggs, I think it really does feel like stealing. Whereas when it's an animal that you're kind of bred for the purposes of wealth and they're not living in good conditions, it somehow feels acceptable. And I think part of this just relates to the social conditioning that we're brought up in, and how eggs are portrayed in media and how people talk about them. But if you just apply the logic of thinking about it in the context of other animals, I think it really does feel like stealing. And so that was my take on it in South America, and it's something that really prompted me to think about it. The second thing that really prompted me to think about eggs and whether or not it's stealing was with work. I was volunteering at a farm that had lots of different breeds of chicken in King's Cross. They're a non-slaughter farm, and there was this breed of chicken called a silkie, and you give it any egg. It doesn't need to be fertilized. It doesn't need to belong to a silky species. It could be a goose egg. It could be a turkey egg. It could be a snake egg. It has an egg. It will sit on it, and it will look after it until something hatches. I was amazed. And what I found even more amazing is I was going in to change the water at these for these chickens, I got a bit close to a silky egg that wasn't even sitting on its own eggs, it was sitting on another bird's eggs. Another chicken just came up to me, and it ran up to me. First it like went with its claws, its talons, and then it slapped me with its chicken wing. And it really brought home the fact that these are animals that care for their young, had motherly instincts, want to protect one another, but we've just got ourselves into a position where we've bred a certain type of chicken that is really docile, that even if it's experiencing pain and we don't know how much pain it's experiencing, when we take its eggs, it doesn't do anything back to us, it doesn't hit us, but it doesn't make that act of taking any different. So these are like two, the sort of the getting offered ostrich eggs, and then encountering the silky and the other chicken that that slapped me with its wing, really just challenged how I thought about eggs, and really brought home this idea that stealing and challenged this cultural perception that we have growing up in the UK, in the West. Right, so moving on to the actual violence. So I think reasonable people in a Jain context, thinking about the principle of Shaya, I think it's quite easy to see that it is stealing, although it may not necessarily feel that way emotionally because of our cultural upbringing. And if you're speaking to non-Jains about why Jains don't eat eggs, maybe they won't even recognise the stealing perspective. They might recognise the legal perspective and think animals are their own people. But even if you don't recognise something as stealing, a lot of people will understand and recognise that animals can suffer and that they can experience pain. And so there's the violence itself in eating eggs. So we've already had someone mention it doesn't matter if eggs are fertilised or not. I think it's pretty clear if an egg's fertilised, it is going to turn into life. And by killing it, by eating it, you're ending a life early. Does anyone have any thoughts about an unfertilised egg? Whether it's any different?
If there's no potential for life, it doesn't really count as getting or taking it away. Because if it's unfertilised, it wouldn't produce anything anyway.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that was part of the position that got me like feeling comfortable eating eggs. Right? It was just like, well, fine. We can take a reverence for all life perspective and accept it might have the potential. We can accept that in other cultures and other times, it may not have been possible to get unfertilised eggs because you wouldn't have separated the males and females, or you would have just taken them away from kind of a wild animal. But in the context of mass-produced eggs that are farmed, they're not fertilised, they're not going to turn into a life. What is the problem? And I think that's the position that people come into it from the West. I'd say let's just accept, let's just take the hypothetical view that it's not a problem. There's still other violence in egg production that means having eggs is problematic. So I'd say, like, if you're trying to explain your position to someone else outside the Jain community, I think probably they may take the view that an unfertilised egg isn't a problem in the same way you've articulated it. So I'd say it's irrelevant to whether or not you want to have eggs or not. So I'd say a lot of eggs are produced in cages or in confined conditions where the chickens themselves have got very little space to perform their natural activities, interact with other chickens, and they they live a life like that. You guys may all have seen images of chickens in battery farms, heard about the term battery eggs, heard about the term free-range eggs, where chickens are allowed to roam in a certain indoor space. But I think most people would recognise this as being far from ideal, and something that's not good. I'd say it's violence towards chickens. But, sorry, that was a second slide. There are about 30 million, so just as a context, there are about 30 million egg-laying hens in the UK. I don't have the exact stats of how many of them are caged and how many of them are free range, but you can be rest assured that quite a lot will be coming from systems like this. In free range farms, chickens aren't in cages, but it's not a necessary requirement that they'll get open daylight. I mean, quite often they'll just be in big sort of units like this with thousands upon thousands of birds, and there may be a requirement for them to have a small door so they can access outside space or not, but it's still very, very far. It's quite distant from a condition that people would say is a natural environment for birds. In the UK, it feels like there's been a movement towards higher welfare eggs, happy eggs, things that are called that. I'd say I've not really seen a system of egg production that I think would give the chickens themselves a satisfactory standard of living. But I'd say even this, as Jains, is not the biggest reason why I think we should be avoiding eggs. And that is, so the reason I think that we should be avoiding eggs is because of violence that exists in all egg production systems, however kind they are to the eggs. So basically, chickens can live for up to 7 years. But in the first year of their life, they produce the most eggs, their productivity is the highest. After about a year, the amount of eggs they produce begins to fall. It becomes less cost effective for a farmer to keep them alive, so they normally get sent for slaughter at this stage. And when you've got 30 million chickens, that is 30 million chickens going to slaughter every year. So every single chicken that's alive today producing eggs will probably be killed by next year.
Just in the sense of context, the population of London's about 10, 11 million, correct?
Yeah, the UK is around 60 million.
So half of the UK population is what we're talking in terms of.
Yeah, so basically most of these chickens produce about an egg every day. So that's half an egg per person in the UK per day. That's how many you need 30 million chickens to supply that number of eggs. And every year, pretty much every single one of them will be killed. Now, in order to maintain the supply of eggs, of chickens that are able to produce eggs, they end up fertilizing a small fraction. They hatch, they turn into chicks. There are two types, they're male and they're female. The females get kept, they get used for making more eggs. But the male chicks, they're either minced alive or they're gassed to death. And this is something that you rarely hear about this on mainstream media. I think it'd be quite hard to sell eggs. It's quite easy to sell eggs on the fact that you've got happy chickens while they're alive, but there isn't a lot of information about this. But yeah, it's a sad reality of the egg production process, and it exists regardless of whether the eggs are labelled as high welfare or free range or organic or forest. So yeah, it's basically 2 deaths. You have one male chick and one male chicken, one female spent chicken. So that equates to about 60 million deaths a year, and they come just from the egg industry. Now, my friend Gevil, who's part of the Jain Vegans Working Group, he's not here today. He actually adopted three battery chickens about 2 years ago? Yeah, 2 years ago. I haven't got any pictures of them here today, but this is kind of what they look like when they arrive. They're in a really bad state. So this is what spent chickens, the ones that spent a year confined in cages, end up looking like. And after about 6 months of love and care from him, he regularly posts on social media about them. He's got an amazing video that I don't have time to share, but they look amazing now, and it's quite amazing to see them and see his interactions with them, and it certainly transformed my views of chickens and what type of animals they are. So I wanted to just highlight. So I've highlighted the issues, what I see as the biggest violence that exists in egg production, kind of beyond the conditions of chickens. On my personal journey, I gave up drinking milk before I gave up eggs, and it's because the issues are almost exactly the same for milk and with egg production. So milk production is highest in the first 5 years of a cow's life, but a cow can live to 15 or 20 years. Retired dairy cows, just like the chicken counterparts, are sent for slaughter when their milk production begins to fall. Unlike chickens, cows don't just give milk, they need to be made pregnant in order to give milk. That's often done forcibly through artificial insemination, it's not natural. And then when the calves are born, the female ones are kept for milk production, but the male ones are killed within days of birth. And so for me, I kind of went the other way around. So I learned about the dairy problems at this Jain convention I went to in 2007 in the US. And it was only seeing this process made me think about eggs, and I opened my eyes to what was going on in the egg industry and couldn't really justify eating them anymore. And that's when I became a vegan. So I guess my kind of summary position is, I don't think, you mentioned eggs are required for health. I'd say the evidence, the kind of scientific evidence suggests that we don't need them. I think we may have said it as in a joking way rather than being serious. So the Seventh-day Adventists, they're a group of Christians. They're actually the longest living, systematically studied population in the world. They've got the highest life expectancy in the world. And about half of them are vegetarian. They've got a huge amount of vegetarians. They also have a huge amount of vegans within that group. So within this group that already do better than any other population in the world, the vegetarians live longer than the non-vegetarians, and the vegans do just as well. The average life expectancy is slightly higher for the vegans than for other vegetarians, but it's not statistically significant. And from my perspective, that is the best evidence you need to show you do not need eggs or dairy products in order to be healthy. And so if we want to eat them, I think our best justification is taste and convenience. And with it being increasingly easy to avoid them because of the increased availability of free from processed foods, I think we've got no need to eat them at all. So we've got 5 minutes before 9 o'clock. I wanted to just share with you, if you speak to non-Jain friends or even family members about what to do like how to substitute eggs or something like that in cooking. Sorry? Here are some suggestions. I'm not sure how many of you guys cook at all yet, but so scrambled eggs and quiches. You can use tofu to make really nice quiches. You can also, if you crumble it, it can work just like scrambled eggs. So whenever I have my non-vegetarian friends around for breakfast, scrambled tofu is the thing I'll make for them to demonstrate how you can have something that's really filling that doesn't involve violent of egg production. Omelettes and Spanish-style omelettes, actually chickpea flour, gram flour, works really well. We've got kind of the head of the Vegetarian Society in Spain gave a really good demonstration at a convention I was at, a conference I was at 5 years ago. But he's tested it on some of his Spanish people, and they're like, these are omelettes, couldn't recognise the difference. For mayonnaise, there are loads of egg-free mayonnaises that exist now. This is one brand that's available in health food shops. This is made by Yogi G's, they're an Indian company that are based in northwest London. There are also brands available in all the big supermarkets now. But I think the area where people often struggle with is baking without eggs. And certainly, like, when my parents gave up eggs as well, and they stopped getting used in baking at home, I think the thing that my mum initially did was just to remove eggs from the recipe she was using before, and the result didn't work out quite as well as she liked initially. There's some amazing recipes that exist for kind of baking sweets. There's also this cookbook, which I'd highly recommend, by Miss Cupcake, who runs a vegan bakery in Brixton and won contracts to supply at the Olympics. It's really, really, really good on getting egg-free recipes that can work really well. It's got loads of tips for baking. In terms of baking sweet stuff, there's substitutes that work quite well. Bananas, everyone's got these. These are not complicated at all. They work. They change the taste of whatever you're cooking, but they can bind things together in a similar way that eggs have and create a nice texture. Flax seeds. Now, I'm not sure if any of you guys will have come across them before. These are actually, I consider them to be superfood. They're also they're sometimes expensive in supermarkets, but at VB & Sons, you can buy them for 59p or 69p for a 500 gram pack. Now, I don't know if any of you guys have played cricket or ever worn linen clothing. So linen clothing is made from the fibres of the plant that makes them, and normally you oil cricket bats with linseed oil. The oil comes from these seeds. If you just put them, so I'm just going to do a bit of demonstration. If you put them in water, they become, I have to leave it for a while, they end up becoming gloopy, just like eggs do. And so they work. I'll leave it to work a lot. But they end up working quite well as a substitute for eggs because they've got that binding quality. So they're really healthy to add a source of fibre. Work particularly well in chocolate ones where they're a bit dark because they can be a bit visible. There's an amazing chocolate brownie recipe in there that involves crushed flax seeds soaked in water.
They're rich in omega-3.
Yeah, they're rich in omega-3, which is a really important nutrient. It's normally found in fish oils. Considered to be really important for brain development, and this is one of the richest sources we have as vegetarians. Another thing that's used is soy milk with vinegar. So if you put vinegar in soy milk, it curdles a little bit, and again it ends up having a thicker quality that's more like egg yolks. Again, it requires a bit of time to work, but hopefully it'll fit before your session's over. And the last substitute, which has only been discovered in the last 2 years, is what was called aquafaba. Now, aqua comes from I think it's the Latin word for water and bean, but basically it's chickpea water. So if you cook chickpeas, or you take chickpeas out of a can, a small amount, about 5% of the solid of the chickpeas goes into water. And if you whip it, it ends up having the qualities of egg whites. And in fact, some of the qualities mimic egg yolk, some of the qualities mimic egg whites. So they've become a really popular substitute in baking. And Mahesh's wife Nishma has actually made some meringues using aquafaba, which they taste a bit like, you can taste a little bit of the chickpeas, but they taste a bit like candy floss, so feel free to, I've never actually had meringue, so I'm not sure what it's supposed to taste like, but
What's
and I've yet to cook with aquafaba. Yeah, I don't actually have an electric whisk, but it needs whisking for a little bit amount of time, so I haven't done it before.
And with the flaxseed stuff, it kind of sticky enough, it will bind, it'll sort of...
I think in hot water.
In hot water, maybe it hasn't worked, but yeah, like, so we actually, my dad used to soak them, we just have them every day for the omega-3s actually in hot water, but it'd be really gloopy in the morning. So my dad would pour a kettle into a little bowl with them crushed, and it'd be really gloopy to drink. It's not the most pleasant thing to drink on its own, but...
Well, now a lot of people, what they do is they, you know, like how you have wariari, like you roast the wariari, you could roast the flaxseed and have it like wariari, or mix it with wariari and just have a little bit every day, just, yeah, for health purpose.
Anyway, I think we've reached an hour, so you guys have got some fun day planning. If you've got any questions or anything like that, I'm happy to answer them afterwards if there's any time.
Have you guys got any questions?
You know, it's saying that they rumors about estrogen, how they're really high in estrogen content. Is that actually true, or can I just keep on drinking the same one without?
Yeah, so soya is one of the most studied foods in the world. So is milk. There've been lots of studies showing pretty small beneficial effects from having soya, which vegan groups tend to jump onto and say, hey, it's really good to you. And then there are some small adverse effects that either like in popular media end up getting blown out of proportion as well. So from the reading I've done, I don't think there's any reason to exercise caution with having soy milk. Out of the different plant-based milks that exist, I think it's the best in terms of taste, in terms of nutritional profile, in terms of its versatility in cooking, and it's also the cheapest and most widely available. So I don't think there's a problem with it at all. But I can get back. One of my colleagues is a kind of nutritional advisor at the Vegan Society that will be able to provide more information.
I think it depends on how much soya you have in your diet.
Yeah.
So like, you know, if you're having excessive amounts of soya in your diet, then it's probably more...
It's still on the scale of things. On the scale of things, there's smoking, there's drinking alcohol, there's not exercising. You're talking about like effects which are hundreds of the size of that in both the benefits and the costs. So, like I'd say in the grand scheme of your overall diet and health, whether or not you have soya is probably a really, really small question. But it makes sense to have variety. So not only have soya in the same way, we shouldn't only have wheat or rice, which...
Because there is a huge variety, isn't there? There's hemp meal, there's rice meal, oat meal. Like, there's a huge variety.
Any other questions? Did you find that really interesting? Was it?
Yeah.
Did you learn something from it? Yeah.
We've got some flyers with information about the egg production process made by animal aid. Also some stuff about dairy. If you want to take it, then...
Sagar, can you just tell us about some other products that have eggs used in them that we wouldn't normally assume, like everyone would know cakes have got eggs in them.
Yeah.
But what other kind of products use eggs that you wouldn't be naturally aware that they have eggs?
So, pastries and bakery items, I think. It's quite like croissants that often have eggs. You can actually buy croissants. So if you buy them from the Just Roll, they're a company that makes pastries, right? You can buy the pastries and roll them yourself and bake them, and they don't have eggs in them. But if you get them from a bakery section, the chances are they'll have eggs inside. And very often, there isn't, even though there's labelling on processed products that you buy that are pre-prepared, if you buy something from a bakery product, they often don't have allergen labelling as clearly there.
Sometimes they use things like glazing, right? Which is
sometimes it'll be glazing, sometimes it'll actually be in the pastry itself. And then there are a couple of breads where eggs can feature in. Buying vegetarian sandwiches out and about, like quite often there'll be mayonnaise, and so eggs will be in there. Some companies like Prex are now using coconut yogurt instead, and they've actually launched a vegetarian store. But quite often, just eating vegetarian sandwiches out end up having eggs, and it's quite hard to avoid it.
Going back to the egg topic, I think many people in school just bring up the fertilized egg topic. So is there any way you can go back and eat unfertilized egg that it's not right to eat it instead of like saying it's violent? Is there like an actual argument against that?
So if you take my friend Gebel, he's adopted 3 chickens, right? They still produce a lot of eggs. Now, I'm not gonna say that I think if he were to take those eggs and either eat them himself or give them to someone else, I'm not sure I'd say that constitutes violence. In fact, the chickens themselves sometimes eat those eggs, right? They're unfertilized and they go. What I would say is that we here know we don't need eggs to live on at all, right? We know it's possible to be perfectly healthy without eating eggs. But there are animals, like cats, like kind of reptiles that we live amongst that really, really struggle without eating animal products. So if you can give eggs that come about in non-violent ways, right, which is very rare, it's only when you've got an example like, so if it's through commercial production, there'll be violence because the spent chickens and the male chicks will get killed. If you've got an example like Gebel's, fine. There may not be violence in how they're made, right? But by eating them, we are propagating the idea that it's acceptable to eat eggs or acceptable to use animals in this way. And there are other animals that if we were to give them these eggs, it would substitute them eating other animals. And so that's generally my response to people that wouldn't recognise a violence argument or take you to this logical position which in day-to-day life you never really experience. Does that work?
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I've got a question for you guys. Who likes some ice cream?
Yeah, have some. 2.0. This is just homemade ice cream. So it's egg-free, dairy-free, of course.
But this is okay, this is good. Love you. I like it. They're cold.
What flavour is it, guys?
Raspberry.
Yeah.
Something with flaxseed.
Thanks. No flaxseeds inside.
Can you come every week and do this?
Sorry?
Can you come every week and do this?
There's more if you want.
The views from Nishma.
People will know what she's the maker of the ice cream and the meringues.
Bye.
You want some more?
Really nice.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad you guys enjoy it. The ice cream is made of meringues. The meringues are made from chickpea, water, sugar, vanilla extract, and cream of tartar. That's all I've used in there. Plus nothing. The photos that, so it all got fluffed up like that. And then I made meringues from that first. And anything that was left over, I put some raspberries. I had frozen raspberries, so I put some raspberries in there.
Sure.
Coconut milk, so that's the canned coconut. And that's it, I think, yeah. And then I just mix it in a smoothie maker. And then I put in a freezable double and put in a freezer. Then you remove it after 3 hours, and then you try and de-ice it again, and then you put it back in the freezer. So, yeah. Very nice.